This is CBC Radio 1, 990 AM, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg.
When Derek Johnson was diagnosed with cerebral palsy, his family thought that he would never be able to speak. And then they met Professor Anna Stubblefield, and she believed that with the right technique, he could say what was on his mind. But what began as an opportunity turned into accusations of sexual assault. I'm Kathleen Goldhar, and this week on Crime Story, we dive into the complicated questions surrounding the doc, Tell Them You Love Me. Find Crime Story wherever you get your podcasts.
You know the feeling of finding a really good podcast? Or the feeling of someone always being there, like your favorite radio show? Stream CBC Podcasts, CBC Music, and CBC Radio anytime, anywhere.
This is CBC News. Good afternoon, I'm Josh Crabb in Winnipeg. At noon, it's minus 15 with light snow and blowing snow downtown, minus 16 in Brandon and minus 14 in Dauphin. A blowing snow advisory remains in effect for those two cities and the rest of southwest Manitoba as well. Conditions are expected to improve this afternoon. A proposal to build affordable housing next to the Granite Curling Club has sparked a battle with the city. That dispute was the focus at City Hall this morning. CBC's Cameron McLean reports.
Delegates packed the gallery in the council chamber for a hearing this morning. The city wants to subdivide and rezone the parking lot next to the Granite Curling Club, which the city owns. The University of Winnipeg Community Renewal Corporation has proposed building 111 units, with half of them designated affordable. The city says it needs to move fast in order to access federal funding. But the Curling Club's board says the plan threatens their future. They worry the loss of parking will hurt their membership. Committee member Councillor Russ Wyatt questioned why the city only approached one developer about the property. City staff told the committee the proponent has agreed to keep half the units affordable for 99 years. And it has a proven track record of other projects downtown, which means they can finish the project within the time frame set out in the Housing Accelerator Fund. Cameron McLean, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A 37-year-old man is in hospital after a stabbing on Princess Street. Winnipeg police say they were called to the 300 block around 2 this morning. They found a man lying on the ground with a serious stab wound to the lower body. Officers applied a tourniquet and he was taken to hospital in stable condition. Major Crimes is investigating. The Energy and Natural Resources Minister is in Washington today. Jonathan Wilkinson is talking to U.S. officials about Donald Trump's threatened tariffs. He says Canada has the resources America needs.
I just go back to things like Canada can do a lot on critical minerals to reduce the American dependence on China. This is at a time where China is banning the export of a number of important critical minerals to the United States. And I think that's a much more productive conversation. And so I am certainly trying to ensure that we're offering an alternative that is a positive alternative to turn away from the discussion on tariffs.
Beijing is in its own tariff tiff with Washington after Trump imposed a 10% levy on Chinese goods this week. A University of Manitoba professor says historically tariff wars don't end well for either side. History prof Leonard Coufert says the last big trade war between Canada and the U.S. began in 1930, when then President Herbert Hoover put tariffs on Canadian goods in an attempt to bolster U.S. business after the stock market crash. Coufert says Canada retaliated and it backfired.
It did nothing to employ more people. It drove down consumption in general, because if people are laid off, they can't afford to buy more stuff. They're going to just focus on the necessities, and any costs that are increased by tariffs are going to be borne by the consumer.
Coufert says no one country can produce everything, not even the U.S. He says tariffs will end up increasing inflation. A roundtable event is planned tomorrow to discuss tariffs at the University of Manitoba. Trump's tariff threats and insults have prompted many Canadians to rethink trips to the U.S. As Steve Rukavina tells us from Montreal, travel agents say anger and anxiety are prompting a wave of cancellations.
Teacher Pascal Nadeau has been saving for 3 years to take a trip to wine country in California in the spring. He booked airline tickets, an RV rental, and accommodation. Now he's canceled it all. Nadeau says the trigger for him was when Donald Trump said the U.S. didn't need Canada for anything. He was disgusted by that sentiment, so he'll spend his vacation dollars elsewhere. And he's not the only one. Amra Durakovic speaks for the travel company Flight Centre. She says since the weekend, people across Canada have been cancelling trips to the U.S. explicitly because of the tariff threat.
That is the sentiment I'm hearing when I speak with our customers. They are upset. They are hurt. Trust has been broken.
Durakovic says in some cases, people are cancelling $10,000 or $20,000 trips, even if they lose their deposits. Steve Rukavina, CBC News, Montreal.
In other news from the Trump administration, the Justice Department is suing the state of Illinois and the city of Chicago, claiming they are interfering with the Trump administration's immigration enforcement policies. The suit claims federal immigration law is being undermined at the state and municipal level. Chicago is one of a number of sanctuary cities in the U.S. It means it can limit its cooperation with Washington when it comes to a range of immigration issues. Also today, President Donald Trump has announced he is establishing a White House Commission on Religious Liberty. Speaking at the annual National Prayer Breakfast, Trump also says he'll be ordering the Attorney General to create a task force to identify and investigate anti-Christian bias within the federal government. And finally, Montreal police are investigating a wave of vandalism on the campus of McGill University. Spokesperson Caroline Chevrefil says callers reported a group of people making their way around the area last night.
The group of suspects quickly smashed several windows on 3 buildings, and they also committed graffiti to then flee the scene on foot before the arrival of the police. Some verifications were made to locate possible surveillance cameras nearby the scene.
Police are not commenting. No suspects have been identified. And that is CBC News from Winnipeg. Your next local news is at 12:30.
Good afternoon, Manitoba. You're listening to Radio Noon on CBC Radio 1. It is Thursday, February 6th. My name is Chloe Friesen. Thank you for spending your afternoon with us. Coming up on today's show, we'll hear from a Manitoban who survived a congenital heart defect that she didn't discover until she was in her late 30s. And we've gone from dry January to phone-free February. It's a global campaign to either eliminate or cut down our phone usage, especially for kids and teens. Coming up on our call-in conversation, do you try and reduce the time your kids are on their phones? We want to hear from you. But first, coming up on Radio Noon, the 30-day tariff pause means back to business as usual for now. But for one Manitoba business, it's still a major cause for concern. We'll find out why. For some, the 30-day pause on threatened U.S. tariffs are a welcome reprieve, but for others, the uncertainty alone is still cause for concern. Lowen Windows and Doors manufactures their products in Steinbach, around 85% of which goes to the U.S. CBC's Zubina Ahmed spoke to President and CEO Neil Fast about how a tariff would impact his business.
The greatest challenge with any sort of upcoming tariff is the uncertainty that it introduces into our supply chain. With our customers who may order and work on their homes months, if not years in advance, to upstream to our suppliers of aluminum and softwood that may be impacted by tariffs coming into Canada. It introduces so much uncertainty in all areas of the business. So it instantly makes our products much more expensive in the U.S. It may make our dealers less profitable. It will certainly make Lowen less profitable. And the worst case scenario is, of course, customers choose to buy from some other location. I think the tariffs can affect the business in a couple of different ways. As our products become more expensive, certainly we will sell less in the United States and make up for it by selling more in other areas. Our profits may go down, and that will potentially reduce the amount of cash that we would be able to reinvest in the business in the coming year. So we are doing several things to help mitigate the impact of the tariffs. We are certainly increasing the frequency of our shipments down to the United States while there are no tariffs in place. We are looking at sharing the cost of our tariffs with our dealer network and with our partners. We are, of course, managing expenses closely in the business so that we can be prudent while times are so uncertain.
What about
about your workers here? Like, how are they feeling? Are they concerned, with this whole situation? Are they concerned that there could be some layoffs or not?
Of course they're concerned. We work really hard to communicate with our employees. Yesterday, we brought everybody together for a message. We had more conversations today as situations will change. Lowen has been through a lot in the past 120 years. 2010 was incredibly challenging with the banking crisis. Certainly a inconsistent trading partner will be frustrating for a business, but we've been through worse, and this certainly won't bring us down.
And do you think that you would have to lay off some of your employees if there would be tariff imposed, do you think?
It's certainly possible, but there are several other actions that we're taking, and that would certainly happen first before we would look at layoffs. We have incredibly skilled employees, and frankly, we would not want to lose a single one of them to layoffs if we have any other choice. Certainly the biggest challenge in Canada is the amount of interprovincial trade barriers. By some estimates, they are as damaging to the Canadian economy as a 25% tariff. We have different adoptions of energy codes in different provinces. Our tradespeople, our healthcare professionals have different certifications. Of course, there are challenges shipping products like alcohol across the border. If our provincial governments and federal governments could work together to addressing all those issues, it will make buying locally Canadian-made products much easier for everybody.
The Premier is also talking about Trump-proofing the Manitoba economy. What would that mean for Lowen?
The Manitoba economy and Lowen are shipping much more there in the 90s. There are certainly other markets that Lowen could export to. We would love to sell more in the Canadian market. We will certainly be bringing attention to our Canadian brand in the coming months and coming years. And yes, any product that we can move away from unreliable trading partners into Canada, we would appreciate it. But we have a wonderful relationship with our U.S. customers. We are committed to the U.S. business for the long term, and we have no doubt that particularly tariffs at the levels that were threatened a few days ago, those are not something that will be in place permanently. Trade is one of those wonderful things that everybody wins. There doesn't need to be a winner or loser in bilateral or trilateral trade, and Lowen and frankly many other Steinbach businesses and Manitoba businesses have really benefited from that. And it benefits the U.S. consumer, it benefits Canadians, and we fully expect to see that going forward.
What are the alternate ways of doing business with the U.S.?
Lots of Manitoba businesses have manufacturing facilities in the United States. That's something that is challenging for Lowen. We have an incredibly skilled workforce and a very high quality handcrafted product. It would be incredibly challenging to move everything that you see in this factory down to the United States. We think that we are at our best producing here with such a great team and then shipping down to the U.S.
That was Neil Fast, President and CEO of Lowen Windows and Doors, speaking with CBC's Zubina Ahmed.
New on CBC Gem this February. 3 inspiring films that celebrate Black history. Summer of Soul unearths never-before-seen footage of the Harlem Cultural Festival in 1969, featuring music's greatest artists. Invisible Beauty profiles fashion icon Beth Ann Hardison and her lasting impact. And Queen of Glory takes us on an intimate journey of the Ghanaian immigrant experience. Watch them all for free, starting February 1st on CBC Gem.
It is 12:14. You're listening to Radio Noon here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg, 97.9 FM in Brandon, and everywhere on the CBC Listen app. And hello to the folks watching on YouTube. I'm Chloe Friesen. Thank you so much for joining us. Still to come on the show just after our 12:30 news. We know that excessive phone use causes problems, especially for kids and teens, but a new global campaign is encouraging parents to wait to give their kids a phone for as long as possible. Today on our Calling Conversation, how are you trying to encourage your kids to cut down on phone use? Have you delayed giving them a phone? Or do you think that they need one for their day-to-day lives? Call us. We want to hear from you. Also, still to come on the show, February is Heart Month. We'll hear about a new report from Heart and Stroke about how more Canadians are surviving congenital heart disease and thriving. A Manitoba woman shares her experience with CHD that she didn't discover until she was in her late 30s. That's coming up next here on Radio Noon. But first, a look at our weather forecast. We do have a blowing snow advisory in place for Westman with winds gusting up to 60. They will start backing off throughout the afternoon. But right now in Brandon, there is a blowing snow advisory, minus 15, feeling like minus 28 with the wind chill in Brandon. In Thompson at the moment, minus 12, light snow at the airport, feels like minus 19. And here in Winnipeg at the Forks, minus 14, feeling like minus 19 with the wind chill. Well, it is February, and February is Heart Month. It's a time Canadians are encouraged to think about heart health. Earlier this week, the Heart and Stroke Foundation released a report about people living with congenital heart disease, or CHD. It shows that although more people survive CHD into adulthood, the healthcare system needs to adapt to meet their changing needs. 1 in 4 CHD cases requires a medical intervention in the first year of life, and now 9 in 10 babies born with a congenital heart defect survive. But sometimes people with CHD can go undetected until later in life. Shauna Kirshen is a survivor from Saugeen First Nation. I spoke to her earlier this week.
Hi there.
Can you share a bit about your experience with CHD?
Sure. So I was one of the cases that was left undiagnosed. I didn't find out that I had a defect until I was just reaching 40 years old. So
how did you discover that?
I found a nurse practitioner. They had done a, just a complete physical on me. And during that physical, I had mentioned that I had palpitations, and they were more noticeable than in the past. So they did a EKG, and from the EKG, that was where the doctor had noticed something that was concerning. So I was then referred to a cardiologist.
And what did you learn at that appointment? Were you surprised by what you heard?
I was. I didn't think that it was that serious. He had done an ultrasound in his office, and that was when he had mentioned that I had a hole in my heart, and that would most likely lead to surgery intervention.
What was it like in the moment learning that there was a hole in your heart?
Yeah, it was hard to believe at first, and then you start to really take care of your body after learning that it's essentially compromised, I guess.
What did that look like? What did taking care of your body look like? What sort of new routines did you add into your life?
Less stress. Maybe not pushing yourself too much if you're doing exercises, or if you're doing any work at home, carrying heavy things, maybe not smoking, drinking less alcohol.
Now, the report from the Heart and Stroke Foundation of Canada, it notes that most of the specialized CHD clinics across the country, they're often concentrated in bigger cities. What has that experience been like?
Now, they do emergency surgeries at St. Boniface Hospital here in Manitoba. However, my case was a little bit more advanced, and I had to go to Edmonton. I would say for a full year, I was booked every single month. So it was a roller coaster of preparing yourself, thinking, okay, I got to, plan for flights, I got to plan for hotels. And then I would get bumped. Definitely a roller coaster of emotions preparing yourself for this huge surgery and getting bumped each time.
I can't imagine what that must have felt like after flying all the way there and preparing yourself. What sort of supports were available, or do you wish were available to you in that moment?
I live on a reservation. I did get assistance through NIHB. Now, not everyone has these assistants, and maybe not even know about them. So I didn't know about it until I had traveled the second time.
Shauna, how are you doing now? I'm sure listeners are very curious to know post surgery. How's your life now? How's your health?
It's great. I was able to attend a cardiac rehab with the Wellness Institute here in Manitoba. There's an education portion as well as supervised exercise. Looking back on it now, it was the time in my life where I was most forced to start small and just focus on what I can do, today. I've come a long way. I've made a lot of lifestyle changes, eating better, less stress. The sleep was one of the most challenging times. It's hard to sleep after a heart surgery.
Shauna, what do you want fellow Manitobans to know about CHD and heart health from your perspective? What should people be thinking about this month?
It just, taking care of your body. Listen to what your body's telling you. If you're having symptoms of just fatigue, palpitations, don't wait to see a GP. There's a lot of great nurse practitioners out there. Yeah, just take care.
Well, Shauna, thank you so much for sharing your story with us, and take care of yourself.
You're very welcome.
Shauna Kershen lives in Sagkeeng First Nation. We spoke earlier this week, and you can read the full report on CHD released by the Heart and Stroke Foundation of Canada at their website, www.heartandstroke.com. Now we're going from cutting back one vice to another this year. From dry January for alcohol, we roll right into Phone-Free February. It's a global campaign to either eliminate or cut down our phone usage. And there's some new interventions out there to help us accomplish the goal, but we still need to have the willpower. CBC's Jason Osler finds out what could help.
Imran Aziz knew he was on his phone a lot, often for essentials like communicating with family or work. But what really upset the Canadian software developer was when he figured out just how much time he used it for non-essential purposes.
I look at my screen time and it was abhorrent. I was looking 6 hours at my phone just to relax.
Aziz says it was generally the same 4 social media apps and games that were eating away the hours. He realized it was disrupting the life he actually wanted to live and providing a model for his kids.
It cuts my family time. I will be sitting with my wife and my kids and I'll be looking at my phone. And that's not setting up a good example.
Once he had that realization, it was the final straw.
That's when I seriously start thinking that this is my New Year resolution. I will only use my phone as a necessity.
That was the hope, but as a realistic goal, Aziz wants to go from 6 hours a day to 2 hours a day of non-essential use like social media. He's managed to shave a few hours a day so far by uninstalling some addictive games and keeping his phone out of the bedroom, but admits it's not easy.
There are so many times that I end up relapsing. I go to gym, had a good workout, 1 hour, 1.5 hours, come back, then sit on sofa 3 hours on my phone.
There are products and apps now to try and help people like Aziz. Paul English, who founded the travel site Kayak, told WHDH in Boston about a new idea he developed.
I want to get them outside.
A new iPhone app called Step In is set to help users take a step toward better health. It blocks your social media apps unless you take a walk.
So if you don't walk, you don't watch.
For example, you can choose an app you want to limit and set it so you have to take 100 steps to earn 1 minute of time. You can customize it any way you want. There's also a physical product you can use. Here's more from the tech news site CNET.
This is the Brick. You scan it with your iPhone to block the apps of your choosing, which in my case are the social media apps I spend way too many hours doom scrolling on. You can't get back into them until you rescan.
Jay Olson is a postdoctoral fellow in the Department of Psychology at the University of Toronto, Mississauga, who studies problematic smartphone use. He says most products like these have no scientific backing behind them, but they're still worth a shot.
You have this thing that's always trying to vie for your attention, and it's super easy to use. So basically anything that will add friction to how you use it could be effective in terms of reducing your screen time.
Olson says anything that even slightly impedes you from using your phone is a good thing, because simply saying you're going to use it less isn't enough.
It could be solved theoretically super easily if you just say, oh, just put down your phone. But practically people find that this doesn't work. And so it's about reducing that constant strain on willpower.
And even the interventions like an app to earn your time or a tile to scan still mean you have to trust yourself not to disable them. Which is why Olson says involving another person to hide that tile or create a passcode could actually be better.
You now have to persuade somebody else that although you told them, hey, don't let me use this app and only you have the passcode and that, you now have to have this kind of socially uncomfortable situation.
He says having that third party involved also makes the commitment public, which could potentially hold you more accountable. There are simple interventions that are proven to help a little, like disabling your notifications or setting your phone to grayscale. Olson says everything is worth trying because cutting back phone usage can have tangible benefits.
When people are able to successfully reduce their screen time in this way, sometimes we see improvements like they feel less depressed. Sometimes they feel they're sleeping better. It improves their mental health.
We can know all that, want to do it, and yet it's still hard, according to Imran Aziz. He quit smoking decades ago, so how does cutting back phone time compare?
It is extremely addictive. It is even harder than quitting smoking, to be honest with you.
Aziz believes he can do it, though, and the more publicly accountable he can be about it, the better chance he has. For CBC Radio, I'm Jason Osler.
Thanks, Jason. Now, coming up here on Radio Noon for our call-in conversation, do you try and reduce the time your kids are on their phones? Do you try to model it yourself? Did you delay buying your kids a phone for as long as possible? We want to hear from you, so text us. Our phone-in line will be open shortly, but text us, which I know is a bit of an oxymoron, seeing as we're talking about using your phone less, but we still want you to text us. That number is 204-588-7355.
Sway to the song.
You tell me all your fears and I tell you how it's been such a long, long time. I felt this way that you've been on my mind. Maybe that's as far as...
Out of Winnipeg, that's Chris Ulrich with Friends on the Internet. And a great song as we head into our call-in conversation about screen time and phone usage, especially for children. Does your child have a smartphone? Should they have a smartphone? That's the topic of our call-in conversation coming up here on the show. Our phone lines will open just after our 12:30 news. The number 204-780-0893 or send us a text 204-588-7355. Your CBC Local News is next.
This is CBC News. Good afternoon, I'm Josh Crabb in Winnipeg. At 12:30, it's -14 with light snow and blowing snow downtown. Hazy and -12 in the Paw, -12 with light snow in Thompson. A blowing snow advisory remains in effect for southwest Manitoba. Delegates packed City Hall this morning for a hearing over a contentious affordable housing proposal. The city wants to subdivide and rezone the parking lot next to the Granite Curling Club, which it owns. The University of Winnipeg Community Renewal Corporation has proposed building 111 units, with half of them designated affordable. The city says it needs to move fast in order to access federal funding, but the Curling Club's board says the plan threatens their future. They worry the loss of parking will hurt their membership. The RCMP is investigating after an Ashern business and home were shot at and 2 people attacked. It happened early Saturday morning. Officers were called about a disturbance at a business. They arrived to learn a woman had attacked a man and a woman with a knife. Another man with a firearm was seen coming into the business and then quickly leaving. A short time later, a gunshot was heard from the parking lot. A vehicle was hit. Both suspects then took off together. The victims were treated for minor injuries in hospital. While there, they learned their home had also been shot at. Police haven't been able to find the suspects. Canada and Mexico aren't the only U.S. allies worried about Donald Trump's threat to impose tariffs. Energy Minister Jonathan Wilkinson says there's also concern in the European Union.
I think the Europeans are watching what has been happening on the conversation around tariffs in Canada with some degree of surprise and certainly lots of concern. I think many are of the view that if the president would do something like this to Canada, which historically has been the closest ally of the United States, what may be in store for Europe?
Trump has singled out the EU as his next target for tariffs. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will be headed to Paris and Brussels on Saturday on a mission to expand trade cooperation. And historians at University of Manitoba say one of the last big trade wars between Canada and the U.S. deepened the Great Depression. Leonard Kufert is a history professor at U of M. A roundtable is being held this week to discuss the impact of tariffs historically. Kufert says after the stock market crash in 1929, President Herbert Hoover put tariffs on Canadian goods in an effort to bring more goods and manufacturing into the U.S.
It's really hard for nations to make everything to suit their own needs, and I think it's a bit of a fantasy for a nation like the United States to think that they can just again put up these tariff walls and their economy will all of a sudden spark to life where they found it wanting previously.
Kufert and 3 other history professors will be talking all things tariffs at University of Manitoba tomorrow. The event is open to all and runs from 1 to 2:30 in the afternoon at St. John's College. And that is CBC News from Winnipeg. Your next local news is at 1:30.
Thank you very much, Josh.
You're welcome.
That is CBC's Josh Crabb. I'm Chloe Friesen filling in here on Radio Noon. I am now joined by CBC weather specialist Riley Lachuk. Riley, we're looking at some blowing snow in Westman.
Yes, really, I mean, right across southern Manitoba.
Gotcha.
It meets the advisory threshold.
Right. I saw the word advisory.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa.
We've even seen blowing snow here in the downtown here in Winnipeg. Winds right now in Winnipeg, 40, sustained at 39, gusting to 50. Gusts almost to 60 through parts of the Red River Valley into Emerson, 50 in Morden, 52 in Brandon at the moment, 56 in Dauphin. So, we are seeing, as expected, some gusty winds on the backside of this area of low pressure that pushed through, bringing us some of that snow overnight. 2 to 5 centimeters in Winnipeg up to about 9:30 this morning. About 5 centimeters in parts of Westman, a little more into the Parkland region as expected. So pretty much on par, although the snow didn't start in earnest until we got into the evening hours last night. Even as I was leaving here last night, we're already into some of that blowing snow. Blowing snow advisory, yes, as mentioned, Brandon, Westman, Dauphin, the Highway 16 corridor into Saskatchewan under that as well. So do keep in mind that if you have any highway travel today, you're likely to run into some visibility issues, particularly west of Winnipeg into the Westman region. As expected as well, some clearing behind this. So even into places like Brandon, into Minnedosa, Riding Mountain National Park, back into some sunshine. Peaks of sun is what I'm calling it in Winnipeg. We've seen the sun kind of poke out a couple times here, but really that's what we can expect through the bulk of the afternoon hours here. Maybe a little more substantial clearing by the time we get to late this afternoon, but it's not really until we get into the morning tomorrow that we start to see clearing in earnest. And then we're back into a mainly sunny sky for Friday, some clouds hanging around into Saturday, Sunday as well. So kind of a mix of sun and cloud generally over the next few days. Winds will start to taper off as we get through the afternoon. So even by 4 o'clock, looking at gusts tapering off to more like 20, gusting 40, really backing off overnight to west 10, gusting 20. So we'll start to see those winds dying off overnight into the morning hours tomorrow. Not to say that you won't feel a little bit of a breeze now and then, but generally speaking, we're looking at winds starting to taper off as we get into the day tomorrow. Minus 13 forecast high for both Winnipeg and Brandon this afternoon. Also minus 13 in Dauphin, a bit breezier to the west. Minus 11 in Thompson. Maybe we see a few more flurries into parts of northern Manitoba. Sunshine, minus 14 for Friday, minus 16 for Saturday. Maybe a few flurries on Sunday, and minus 17 degrees.
What I'm taking from that is the phrase peaks and pokes of sunshine.
Yeah, slivers, peaks, poking through the clouds.
Why not?
Anything like that.
I like it. Good words. Thank you, Riley.
You're welcome.
That is CBC weather specialist Riley Lachuk. I am Chloe Friesen. You're listening to Radio Noon on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, or anywhere on your CBC Listen app, or of course on our YouTube live stream. Does your child have a smartphone? Should they have a smartphone? That's a question so many parents and caregivers are asking themselves. Growing consensus is that they shouldn't until kids are older, ideally mid to late teens. It's what Josette Kalea strongly supports. She's an ambassador with the advocacy group Unplugged Canada. It encourages parents to pledge delaying giving their kids phones for as long as possible. We're going to speak with Josette, but we also want to hear from you. Do you agree that parents should delay giving kids phones for as long as possible? When did you give your kid a phone? When do you plan on giving your kid a phone? Maybe you don't plan on giving your kid a phone. Let us know what you're feeling right now. You can call us at 204-780-0893, 204-780-0893, or send us a text at 204-588-7355. Text us 204-588-7355. Josette Kalea joins us now from Unplugged Canada. Hello.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Before we get into some questions here, can you give us an overview about what Unplugged Canada is?
I sure will. So Unplugged Canada is a grassroots movement. Our mission is to raise awareness about the dangers of smartphones in children. We advocate that we want to delay giving a child a smartphone until at least the age of 14. And we do that by encouraging parents to sign a pledge online at unpluggedcanada.com.
How did you get into this work? Why did you join Unplugged Canada as an ambassador?
I'm a parent coach, and I hear all kinds of crazy stories from pediatricians, from clinical counselors, the stuff that we're seeing. And you don't even actually have to be a professional in the mental health field to see the degradation that we're seeing. Parents are seeing it all over the country. Schools are seeing it. So when my girlfriend founded this movement, I felt compelled to be a part of it because I feel wholeheartedly that we need to change this culture and we need to change it now. You know, smartphones have been around since like the 2010s, and we've had this experimentation with Gen Z, and we can see that it's impacted them in such a significant way. And so it's time now to change this trend and save our future generations.
Now, you mentioned that parents are giving their kids smartphones. What might be behind that idea of my kid needs a smartphone, or I should provide this for them?
So first and foremost, I think I think we want connection with our children. We're so worried that our real life world is so unsafe that we feel this need to be tethered to them at all times. So I think that's one. I think the other piece is that every other kid seems to have it. And so we're really minimizing the harm just by understanding that the volume is out there, but it doesn't mean that it's right. And there are alternatives. Like if you want to stay connected with your child, there are different ways you can do that. It doesn't need to be a smartphone.
We're going to get into some of those alternatives shortly here, but I do want to mention we got a call on the listener line. Someone, Shane, called to say that he hates his smartphone. He wishes he could get a flip phone with a great camera. Ooh, yeah, I feel that. He thinks we shouldn't give kids smartphones. What about when it comes to, I know there's lots of ways to stay creative, but there are a lot of things that a smartphone brings, like a camera. You can make videos. When it comes to replacing those methods of connection or those creative outlets, what options would you say are out there for parents?
So there is one that's fairly new on the market called the Pinwheel, and it acts very much like a smartphone, but it doesn't have the social media apps. It's all parent controlled. So it gives, if you need Google Maps, if you need, educational apps, you still have access to those, but you do not have access to social media apps. And so Unplug Canada has no relationship with them. So just, to say that, but also you can get just a basic flip phone, like you indicated. Yeah, it may not have all the bells and whistles, but do we really need those bells and whistles for like a 10-year-old? I mean, parents are giving their kids phones at like 9 and 10. They don't need all of that access.
Now, if you want to call us, if you want to share your thoughts, your feelings, maybe you have a kid and you're kind of wrestling with the idea of when to give them a smartphone, or maybe you chose a specific age and you would go by that decision. Share that with us. You can call us 204-780-0893 or text us at 204-588-7355. We got a text from Jake here. It says, it's been an overlooked aspect of addiction for far too long. I've known for over 15 years. I waited with my oldest, who is now 30, and doesn't let her two kids, who are 6 and 8, use one except for rare occasions. And Jake says their 19-year-old has a very good grip on it and won't let her kids use one when the time comes. It's up to us, people, says Jake. When it comes to addiction, I find this very interesting. When it comes to addiction, you talked about social media being not involved in certain cases of new tech. What are your thoughts on addiction and social media and how it might impact a kid?
Okay, so this is huge, and I'm so glad your caller brought it up, because all of the apps are meant to hook our kids. When a parent gives their child a smartphone, they have no idea that that child is about to spend 6 to 8 hours on their phone every day. They're designed to be addictive from the big tech companies. Kids don't have the capacity to filter, to self-govern, and the dopamine effects and the quick dopamine hits that you're getting from a smartphone when you're scrolling are really hard to compete with. And what happens is that becomes their source of dopamine fix. It's not their friends. It's not the beautiful outdoors. It's their phone. And that is, for me, that addiction piece is the number one reason for parents to say, no, not yet, to a smartphone for their child.
And Jake actually called us on the line to elaborate a bit about his comment. Jake, are you on the line?
Oh yeah, I'm still here.
Yeah, what do you want to share with us?
Well, I really don't know how we're just coming to the realization of this now. It's been pretty obvious for a number of years, if not decades. We used to have advisory lyrics on cassette tapes. And yada yada, it just went right out the window. We can't say no, and obviously the kid's gonna want something like that. It's up to us.
Jake, thank you so much for calling Radio Noon here. I appreciate that. Now, Josette, I'm interested in what Jake was saying there in terms of warnings, right? It seems like we're a bit late to the game here. Now, there's been a movement in some countries to totally restrict phone use altogether for kids. Like in Australia, there's a limit now on social media use. Here in Manitoba, we've seen schools banning phones for specific age groups. What is your take on what's happening globally here with these sorts of warnings and why it's taken us this long to get here?
So I think, Chloe, we live in a world that is so data-based, and for people to react, we need an overwhelming amount of data. Secondly, the big tech companies, they don't want to put those warnings on there, right? And they're huge. They have so much power. And this is what Unplugged Canada is all about, is taking that power back, giving it to parents, raising that awareness. If we wait for policy to change and for government to make changes, we're never going to get ahead of this. And so we've got to take a stand. And your caller is right. Like, it's been so obvious to so many people. I also think for parents, it's really convenient to give their phone or to give their child a smartphone or a screen and, have them go about their day. I think systemically, parenting is hard. It gets harder when you've got two parents who are working, commuting, and that becomes an easy fix. But we've got to get back to parenting without that crazy screen in front of their face. We were doing it 15 years ago, Chloe. We can do it again.
I have another question about parenting, but first I do want to shout out the numbers again if folks want to join us in this conversation. It's a fascinating one, and I'm curious about what people have to say about the age they feel it's appropriate to give their kid a smartphone, whether there is any age they feel is appropriate. So call us 204-780-0893. Text us 204-588-7355. If you have a question for Josette as well, I think she'd be game to answer it. When it comes to parents, some people might say it's up to the parent to model moderate phone use rather than just putting limits on their child's screen time. What are your thoughts around that, of the parent kind of setting the tone of smartphone and screen use in the home?
I think it always starts with us, Chloe. Always. We have to set the example. If we've got parents who are, constantly scrolling on Instagram in front of their kids and also posting, their lives and, having it up for how many likes am I going to get? I mean, that sets the wrong example for their children. I want to say, for Unplugged Canada, we said the pledge says you're not going to give your phone, your child a smartphone until the age of 14. 14 is not really a magic number. It's the number we felt that we could also get away with. I mean, when we started this movement, if we put out there 16, 17, 18, even 15, I don't think we would have gotten any traction, because parents generally want that contact with their children, and they're not thinking of the alternatives. They're just thinking smartphone. So I think as a parent, we have to see, when is my child ready? 14 may not be ready for a specific child, and I don't encourage any younger, even if their parents think that they may be ready.
What do you see those conversations being like between parents and their kids? If someone does want to sit down with their kids and talk about this, what questions do you think that either the parent should be asking the kid or the kid should be asking the parent? How do you facilitate that kind of conversation?
So I think it's up to the parent to share why they want to say not yet. And again, I stress that we're not saying no, we're just saying not yet. And there are a multitude of reasons, right? The sleep fragmentation, attention fragmentation, the addiction, the increased risk in cyberbullying. The other piece, Chloe, when we give our child a smartphone, not only are we giving them access to everything in the world, but we are giving others access to our children. And I think parents need to be really clear and understand that, because it is a huge risk.
I have a bit of a pushback question here. Some people might say we're in the digital age. Kids need to be prepared for the careers they might have and the way of that we interact with one another right now, which is often through the internet. I know I send a bajillion emails a day, sometimes social media DMs and such. What do you say to that if someone wants their kid to be ready for the digital age and for the way that so many of us are interacting right now?
Kids pick up technology so soon. We are not an anti-tech movement by any stretch. We're strictly just saying, stay off the phone until you're at least age 14 and stay off social media until you're at least 16. There are you can use emails, you can use text messaging. You don't have to use a social media app per se. And so a smartwatch can do it, albeit a little more, challenging. A Garmin watch, the flip phones. So you can still communicate. I just don't think there's a rush. And to me, you got to outweigh what the risk is versus the reward.
We got a call on the line from Chimabee. Chimabee, welcome to Radio Noon. You have a specific age in mind where you think kids should be able to access a smartphone.
Yeah, 18 years.
18 years. Okay. Why is that?
Because they will be addicted with the phone now. And secondly, there are a lot of information you need to get on the phone. They will not think critically. Instead, they will go to Google to find the information. So critical thinking is very important. They need it now.
Chimabee, thank you so much for calling us here on Radio Noon. Josette, critical thinking is something that he brought up there that I think is really interesting. What's at risk of being lost if we don't see? If we don't have, or if we have, let me rephrase this. I'm going to get there, Josette. I promise you. What could we lose if kids have smartphones too early?
I think we lose the ability to be discerning. I think when kids are young, they're taking in one-sided information. They're not ready. They're not mature enough to critically think to the extent they need to be when they're on a smartphone. The way the algorithms feed into what you like, and then you continue to get that one-sided perspective. So if we allow this for children, your caller is absolutely right. They're not going to critically think to hear another perspective because they're only being reinforced what they want to hear and what they want to believe and what they originally see first.
It's a bit of an echo chamber already at such a young age.
Absolutely.
Lastly here, Josette, if a parent or caregiver wants to go cell phone free in their family or for their kids, what should that first step be?
Sign the pledge, please. The reason why we're asking people to sign the pledge is because it's strength in numbers. When we go to government in order to change policy, when we've got that strength in numbers, it's just so much easier, and it creates community, and parents can feel that they're not alone in this battle. It shouldn't be a battle, but it still is. My hope, Chloe, is that in 5 years we've changed and reversed this trend.
Josette, thank you so much for joining us on the show this afternoon and for taking questions.
You're welcome. Thank you for allowing me to be here.
Josette Kalea is an ambassador with Unplugged Canada. We reached her in Vancouver. You're listening to Radio Noon here on CBC Radio 1. The show is coming to an end here, but we've got time for a little bit of music. Who doesn't love music? Especially from reggae legend Bob Marley. He would have turned 80 years old today. His home country of Jamaica has been celebrating his legacy with a tribute concert and more. But did you know that Marley has a Canadian connection? Emancipate Yourself from Mental Slavery comes from Marley's redemption song. But it originally came from a speech Jamaican political leader Marcus Garvey gave in Nova Scotia. Jamila is a Juno-nominated musician, and her father played with Bob Marley. Here's Jamila talking about the connections between her province and the reggae great and Marcus Garvey.
So my dad's name, Earl China Smith, he's a guitarist, a self-trained guitarist who's been playing since he was a little boy. He got a lot of his musical experience playing with a band in Jamaica called Soul Syndicate. But Aston Family Man Barrett, the bass player of the Wailers, called him in for a session, and they all loved his spirit. And so he had the opportunity to play several shows leading up to Bob Marley's death in 1981. So we have a lot of connection there, and I'm really grateful to have been able to meet a lot of the family members and to hear some of the stories firsthand. So when we were working on a roots documentary looking at music across the province, it came up that this speech was a thing that happened right here in Africville at the Bethel Church on Room Street in the North End. And so we went there to ask if we could have permission to film inside the church. And it turns out the current owners did not understand the significance of what had happened there. They did not have any awareness of it. And so the team, myself, Charlie Benoit, Jeff Miller, Donna Dublo, we all came together, printed the manuscript and framed it and handed it over to them. And so it's hanging in the church today. And I'm sure for those who don't know, Marcus Garvey was a Jamaican civil rights leader of the early 20th century and the proud founder of the UNIA. And the UNIA became a global movement that encouraged Africa for Africans. And so it's so important that a church now led by an African pastor now has this connection to this incredible speech and this incredible instance in Nova Scotia's history.
That's Jamila talking about the connections between her father, Nova Scotia, and this song. Here is Bob Marley and the Wailers with Redemption Song.
Old pirates, yes, they rob I, sold I to the merchant ships. Minutes after they took I from the bottomless pit, but my hand was made strong by the hand of the Almighty. We forward in this generation triumphantly. Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? 'Cause all I ever have, redemption songs, redemption songs. Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. Have no fear for atomic energy, 'cause none of them can stop the time. How long shall they kill our prophets while we stand aside and look? Ooh, some say it's just a part of it. We've got to fulfill the book. Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? 'Cause all I ever have, redemption songs, redemption songs, redemption songs. Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our mind. Oh, have no fear for atomic
That's
energy.
Bob Marley and the Wailers with Redemption Song, a song that has lyrical connections to Nova Scotia. Marley would have been 80 years old today. You're listening to Radio Noon here on CBC Radio 1. The time is 12:57, so we're nearing the end of the show, but lots of local programming to continue here on CBC Radio 1. Up to Speed starts at 3 o'clock, and host Faith Fundal has joined me in studio.
Chloe Friesen, we're going to hear from a local drag performer who is on a journey to embrace her gender identity with a little help from her friends. Of course, this is something that has been in the news as we look south of the border, folks seeing trans rights being rolled back across the border. We'll hear more about that, and we have a ticket giveaway.
Ooh!
So stay tuned to the program. We have a few pairs of tickets to give away to Denny Ramadan's talk tonight at the Forks.
Yes.
If you don't have your tickets, we might have some tickets for you. So tune in to find out how to win.
Sounds good. And Faith and I will see you there.
Yep, we'll be there.
You are moderating
It's
that
gonna be fun.
conversation,
Yep,
so it's
it'll
going to
be
be a
fun.
good time. Thank you very much, Faith. Up to Speed starts at 3 p.m. and runs until 6 o'clock. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Chloe Friesen. Thank you to Dylan Longhurst, our technician this afternoon. Sierra Sanders is our show director. Wendy Parker, our show producer. And in charge of that YouTube live stream is Kevin Nipa-Tabo. Thank you, Kevin. Again, I'm Chloe Friesen filling in here on the show. Thanks for tuning in. I always have a blast here on Radio Noon. But coming up next on CBC Radio 1, it's Quirks and Quarks.